Hello, and welcome to the Reading Foundations course. Working through 8 modules, we'll learn about the reading end of Balanced Literacy program. Each week, you'll use my course PowerPoint to learn about elements of reading instruction. You will also watch videos, read articles, engage in discussions, and complete assignments, all in the quest to augment your repertoire as a reading teacher. We have a lot to learn, so let's get started. Let me start by telling you a little about me. My name is Lauren Banker, and I've been an educator for 25 years. I started my career as a second grade teacher, then moved to a middle school to serve as a vice principal, and I've spent the last couple of decades in Washington School as an elementary principal. You can see my school pictured on this slide. I have 400 students and 40 staff members, and I love every minute of my work. As a principal, one of my primary responsibilities is to act as the instructional leader and lead learner. So this course is right up my alley. I also want you to know that I recently graduated from Caldwell University with a doctorate in educational leadership. I'm so proud to be a CU alum. And last but not least, I'm a mom to 2 kids, a son in high school and a daughter in middle school. I have a lot of interests that I pursue in my free time, and reading is definitely one of them. I read a lot of professional books and articles for my job, so when I'm relaxing, I prefer to read fiction, and in particular, thrillers or tearjerkers. This slide shows some of my favorite authors. The first 2 titles, Big Little Lies and Gone Girl, will take you on some twists and turns, and the last 2 titles, Handle with Care and 19 Minutes, will definitely make you weep. They're so good, though. These titles count as reading too, and they're certainly in my reading repertoire. People Magazine, Us Magazine, and Glamour Magazine. I love to peruse through some good Hollywood or fashion magazines. Embarrassingly, I have a subscription to People Magazine. I just love it. And as we'll think about during this course, media counts as literacy consumption too. I love watching TV. I watch reality TV shows with my kids all the time. We like Survivor or Master Chef. I watch thrillers with my husband. Have you seen The Handmaid's Tale? You should. And when I find myself alone, I love The Real Housewives. For your first assignment for this module, we want to learn about you. Please prepare 3 to 5 slides introducing yourself to us. We want to learn about you personally, professionally, and we want to learn about your reading preferences. I look forward to getting to know you all better. Now I'd like to take some time to review some course expectations. Like most things in life, the more you put into the course, the more you'll get out of it. My number one expectation is that we all actively engage in the 8 modules with an open mind and all our effort. I promise to work hard to make this course practical and meaningful for you, and I'm hopeful that you'll return my effort with reciprocal time, thought, and energy. You will find a complete syllabus in Blackboard which you can review on your own time. Once reviewed, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. On this side, you'll see the main topics for our 8 modules. Take a minute to read them over. Today, we will learn about balanced literacy, workshop teaching, and we'll zoom into the parts of a mini lesson. For Module 2, we'll explore ways to support our emergent readers through decoding and phonics. In Module 3, we'll learn about various reading assessments and how to use these assessments to inform our instruction. Module 4 will allow us to consider different learners through differentiated teaching strategies. Specifically, we'll learn about conferring and small group instruction. In Module 5, we'll plan a fiction and nonfiction unit of study. Module 6 will take us through the art of writing about reading, and we'll explore the idea of transfer and how we can infuse reading instruction across our school day. In Module 7, we'll learn about interactive read aloud, shared reading, and close reading, all balanced literacy elements that support reading workshop learning. And finally, in Module 8, we'll share our learnings through an inquiry study. There will be 2 ways for you to earn grades during this course. First, you will be given assignments to complete for each module. These assignments will be varied and they will directly relate to the PowerPoint video learning module. All assignments will be made clear in the video, but they will also be posted on Blackboard. You will earn 10% per module for completed assignments. You will also engage in an inquiry study across the entire duration of this course. An inquiry is an investigation. For this study, you will pose a question you have about reading, learning, and teaching, and you will do research to answer your question. Some questions you may be interested in exploring are: how can I differentiate instruction to meet the needs of my learners? How can I make reading instruction supportive for my ELL students? How can I make classroom support rich conversations concerning literature? How can I balance learning to read and reading to learn? Or you can come up with a different question that's meaningful or interesting to you. Once you come up with your question of inquiry, you will research the answer and then write a paper to express your learning. A rubric with expectations for this paper can be found on Blackboard. The paper will be due at the close of the course, and your inquiry paper will be worth 30%. Okay, now that you know a little about me and a little about the course, let's get started with the content in Module 1. Today we will focus on 3 topics: balanced literacy, reading workshop, and the parts of a mini lesson. Balanced literacy is the term used to describe a complete program for literacy learning. It includes the necessary learning needed for students to be proficient readers, writers, and speakers so they can grow into successful lifelong learners. The components of balanced literacy include reading workshop, writing workshop, read aloud, shared reading, interactive writing, and word study. For this course, we will focus on the reading elements in balanced literacy and mostly focus on reading workshop. However, we will do some work on read aloud and shared reading in Module 7. In most schools, teachers are required to include all elements of balanced literacy every day. This daily practice will give students the time needed to build proficiency in the language arts. Workshop teaching is a research-based structure in which the teacher explicitly models teaching strategies and then empowers the students to practice these strategies independently in order to build skills. At the heart of workshop teaching is the belief that whoever does the work is doing the learning. Therefore, the teacher should guide the instruction, but the students should actually do the work. Workshop teaching can be used in all content areas. Whoever does the reading learns the reading. Whoever does the writing learns the writing. Whoever does the math learns the math, and so on. For this course, we will obviously focus on reading workshop. There are several learning principles that we should consider when we think about workshop teaching. First, like we discussed on the previous slide, what our students practice is what they learn. That's why during a workshop lesson, the teacher conducts a 10 to 15-minute mini lesson, and the rest of the time is left for students to practice the strategies taught. Second, an effective workshop lesson has explicit instruction. That means that the teacher is clear about his or her objective, and the teacher models using step-by-step instructions so students are very clear about their learning. The third principle of workshop teaching is that the teacher presents a repertoire of strategies and students practice the various strategies and then choose to use the ones that work for them. Workshop teaching focuses on meaning making, and the teaching is authentic and real world. Finally, in workshop, teachers use assessments to learn about their students and then to plan learning geared towards students' specific learning strengths and needs. This is a lot to remember, but don't worry, we'll go through all of these in great detail, and by the end of the course, the workshop tenets will make perfect sense. Next, let's take a look at the structure of a workshop. As you can see by this chart, a workshop teacher begins the lesson with a 10 to 15 minute mini lesson. We'll talk about the mini lesson shortly. The majority of the time spent is independent student work time. During this time, students are reading books on their level and practicing the reading strategies taught in the mini lesson. Then, at the end of the lesson, the teacher brings students back together again, reviews the teaching point, and allows students to share their work. Every mini lesson has these 5 parts. Once you learn these parts, you will repeat them for every lesson. Since students thrive with predictable routines, students will get to learn and appreciate these 5 mini lesson elements. The 5 parts are the connection, the teaching point, explicit teaching, active engagement, and link. We will look deeper into each part on the next few slides. The purpose of the connection is to prime the brain for new learning by tying the new material to prior knowledge. There are several different ways to make a teaching connection. The most basic connection is to simply remind the students of a prior lesson. Teachers can use words like, yesterday we learned, or do you remember when we learned about? More sophisticated connections are when teachers tell a personal story or an analogy to help students understand a teaching point. On the next slide, I will show you what this could look like. Watch me as I create a connection using a personal story. Readers, I know I tell you stories about my dog Pepper all the time, but did you know that before I got Pepper, I had another dog named Maddie? Maddie was a yellow lab, and she was the first dog I ever had. Maddie was so sweet, but she was different from Pepper. Because of her fur, I had to bathe her only once every 6 months or so. But each week I had to brush her hair, and when I brushed it, tons of fur came out. And if I didn't brush her, if I missed a week, her fur would be all over my house. When I got Pepper, I had to learn a whole new way to take care of my dog. There are some obvious differences between Maddie and Pepper, like size and color. But one not so obvious difference is that Pepper does not have fur. She has hair. Because of that, Pepper has to have a bath about every 6 weeks. That's a big difference. Maddie had a bath every 6 months, and now I have to bathe Pepper every 6 weeks. Also, because of her hair, Pepper doesn't shed. I don't have to brush her hair because her hair doesn't end up all over my house like Maddie's fur did. Thinking about how I had to make changes from caring for Maddie to caring for Pepper made me think about myself as a reader. As you know, we've been reading a lot of fiction books this year, and now we're beginning our nonfiction unit of study. And when I read nonfiction, I have to adjust my thinking, just like I had to adjust my thinking from caring for Maddie to caring for Pepper. Today, I want to teach you that readers use different tools for reading nonfiction texts than they do for reading fiction. Did you see how I hooked the students into a personal story, but then I made the connection from my story to the reading, teaching, and learning? These types of connections are helpful to students because they remember them and refer to them as they try their reading strategies. The second part of the mini lesson is stating the teaching point. During this part of the mini lesson, the teacher simply states the objective by saying, "Today I want to teach you." You want to be sure to include a skill and a strategy in your teaching point. We'll talk more about that on the next slide. Do you remember learning to drive? This is a picture of my first car, the car I learned to drive on. Before I could learn the skill of driving, I had to learn many strategies. I had to learn how to get it in gear, how to put pressure on the gas, how to brake, how to park, how to steer, and many other small strategies that make up the big skill of driving. A skill is a big piece of learning, and strategies are the small parts that make up the big skill. And just like learning to drive, students need to learn small strategies that make up the big skill of reading. There are many strategies that make up each reading skill. For example, students will learn the skill of understanding a story by learning many strategies. These strategies could include stopping and thinking about what was read, predicting what would happen next, tracking a character across a text, thinking about the problem and solution in a story, and there are many, many more strategies you can teach. Here is another example of a skill and some strategies that need to be learned to accomplish the skills. The skill is readers figure out unknown words. Some strategies you can teach to accomplish that skill are look at the pictures, look at the first letter, backtrack and read, read on and go back. After stating the teaching point, the next part of the mini lesson is the explicit teaching. This is the teacher-directed part of the lesson in which teachers model their expectations for students. During this part of the lesson, teachers usually say, "Watch me as I..." Remember when I modeled that personal story connection for you? You will want to model all of your teaching points for your students by actually doing the work right in front of them. During the model, you will also want to create an artifact for students to use during their independent work time. Most teachers create charts during their models, like the one shown on this slide. On this particular chart, you will see a step-by-step procedure, which is good teaching practice because it gives students a roadmap to success. We know you can't just tell a 16-year-old to drive without teaching them how. The same goes for reading. You can't just tell a student to read. You have to teach them the strategies needed to know how to read. In my schools, my teachers create a 3 to 4 step procedure for every strategy. This is how they do it. First, they name the strategy they're teaching. Next, they do the strategy and think about the steps they take to do it. And finally, they write down 3 or 4 steps. The fourth part of the mini lesson is the active engagement. During this part of the mini lesson, students try out the teaching point while the teacher watches and listens. During this part of the lesson, the teacher says something like, "Now you try." Students could turn and talk or turn and teach their partners about their new learning. And the last part of the mini lesson is the link. During the link, the teacher reminds the student of the teaching point and then sets the student up for independent work time. The teacher might say, "Today, during independent work time, you could," or the teacher could prompt the students to set a goal. Okay, here is your second assignment for this week. A mnemonic device is a learning tool that helps students remember information. You probably know and use some mnemonic devices like the ones on this slide. Me very excited, me just sat upon new paint to represent the order of the planets, PEMDAS to represent the order of operations in math, and every good boy deserves fudge to represent the notes on the scale. For this assignment, you will be asked to make a mnemonic device to help you remember the 5 component parts of the mini lesson: connection, teaching point, explicit teaching, active engagement, and link, or CTEAL. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Now that you know the 5 parts of the mini lesson, let's watch one in action. Use the link to pull up this video. While you're watching, use the graphic organizer to take notes on each of the 5 component parts. Record what you see the teacher doing and what you see the student doing. You will submit your notes as an assignment. Now that you know all about the mini lesson and you know that students spend approximately 30 minutes after the mini lesson doing independent work, you may be wondering what you do during this independent work time. There are 3 things teachers do during this time. They confer one-on-one with readers, they conduct small group instruction, or they assess students. We will learn about all these things over the course of our 8 modules. And then, after independent work time, you will conduct a teaching share in which you will remind students of the teaching point once again and give them the opportunity to share their work with one another. Okay, now that you know the foundations of a workshop classroom, it's time to think and talk about how this type of teaching affects students. For your last assignment, this week we're going to participate in a discussion thread. Please answer the following questions. What is the difference between a teacher-centered classroom and a student-centered classroom? And in what ways does workshop teaching create student-centered learning? Please also respond to 2 of your classmates' answers to continue the discussion. That's it for Module 1. Please remember that you have the 4 assignments listed, which we discussed throughout the module. Also, please read Growing Readers pages 2 through 42. And when you're done with all that, start thinking about the big assessment you'll work through all 8 modules, the Inquiry Project. You'll want to have your inquiry question in mind for module number 2. Looking forward to more learning next module.